There's something you must know, darling, something no one taught you, yet it holds the power to shift the wind in any room you enter, the way you speak. Not just the what, but the how, the tone, the space between syllables, the way your voice becomes a lullaby to a soul that never knew peace. There is a rhythm inside every woman, a current of language unspoken and ancient, passed down through lullabies, prayers, whispered warnings, and moaned truths in the quiet dark. Before she learns the sharpness of silence, she is born with melody in her soul. Her voice, before it's ever polished by poetry or buried by apology, is a sacred sound, a hymn, a heat, a home. When a woman speaks, she weaves. She does not merely string together vowels and consonants, she casts something. Every syllable is a spell. Every tone is a thread, winding around the ears of those who listen, binding heart to heart or cutting it clean. This is why her voice must be honored, why it must be used with intention, why she must understand that her mouth is not just a tool of expression, it is a vessel of power. You see, some women don't know what they carry. They underestimate the curl of their voice when they say a man's name gently, or the way silence stings when they withhold warmth. They don't realize that their laughter, when born from joy, is more addictive than any perfume. That when they speak with patience, a man learns to breathe slower around them. That when they whisper truth without needing to win, he begins to feel safe in a way he never knew he needed. But the same voice that can build him can break him. The same tongue that can invite him in can send him running. A word said with cruelty can echo longer than a wound. A sentence laced with comparison, sarcasm, or control can poison even the purest intimacy. A voice sharpened by insecurity does not protect, it pushes. A tone heavy with resentment does not teach, it tears. And yet, many women were taught to yell to be heard, to shout to gain control, to belittle when they feel small. They were told silence means weakness, and speaking softly means submission. But darling, softness is not surrender. Kindness is not weakness. There is a way to be gentle and still command. There is a way to be tender and still be unforgettable. A man remembers how you make him feel, but he learns how to feel from how you speak to him. If your voice comes like thunder every time he falters, he will begin to run from the rain. If your voice carries the weight of every old wound that he didn't create, he will begin to drown in seas he never swam through. But if your voice comes like morning light, steady and warm, even when firm, it will wake him. It will change him. He will lean toward it like flowers toward the sun. Your voice teaches him how to treat you. It tells him what kind of love you offer. It tells him whether your presence is a punishment or a place to rest. When you speak with self-respect, he rises. When you speak with love, he softens. When you speak without fear, he listens, not just to the words, but to the woman inside them. And child, never forget, there is music in you. Music that doesn't scream to be heard, but calls to be felt. Your voice can be the bridge he crosses to become a better man, but only if you first let it be the bridge you walk to your own healing. Only if you learn to speak to yourself with reverence. Only if you stop using your voice to chase, convince, or perform, and start using it to express, soothe, and invite. Speak like you know your words are sacred. Speak like your soul is listening, because it is, and so is he. And when you master this language, not of control, but of connection, not of power over, but of power within, you won't need to raise your voice. Your presence will do all the speaking, and your voice, with all its velvet and fire, will leave fingerprints on his soul. The mouth is a mirror of the heart, and the tongue, oh, the tongue, has a memory all its own. It doesn't just say what you feel, it shows what you carry. Every word a woman speaks is a small piece of her truth, whether she knows it or not. The way she wraps her thoughts in syllables, the pauses between her phrases, the rise and fall of her tone, they all tell the story of how she loves. Love does not always arrive in flowers or promises. Sometimes it comes tucked quietly inside a question like, "Did you eat?" Or in the way she says, "Come home safe." Or in the breath she takes before she answers, choosing not to speak with sharpness even though hurt sits heavy on her chest. The way she speaks to someone in their worst moment is often the truest proof of how she loves them in every other. If her voice is soft, it is not because she is weak. If it is steady, it is not because she is numb. She has simply made a choice to let her love move through her words, not in loud declarations, but in deliberate care. Her tone carries the warmth of someone who has been broken and still chooses gentleness. Her words come wrapped in the grace she gives to herself and in turn to others. But some women speak with armor in their voice, not because they do not love, but because they have not been loved gently. They lace their sentences with sarcasm, speak fast as if running from silence, raise their tone like a wall instead of a welcome. They learn to fight with words before they learn to feel with them. And in that battle between wanting to be understood and needing to stay safe, their voice became a shield instead of a bridge. There is love in the questions you ask, in the way you listen for answers. There is love in the choice to respond instead of react, to soothe instead of shame. The woman who loves with her voice does not shout over someone's fears. She sits with them. She does not weaponize truth. She wraps it in compassion. She does not speak to be right. She speaks to be real. A woman in her power does not use her voice to dominate. She uses it to deepen. Her language is not performative. It is personal. She does not flatter to manipulate, nor does she withhold to punish. She knows the value of silence, and she uses it not to wound, but to wait, to breathe, to choose words that build instead of break. And when she loves deeply, her voice changes. It lowers when she worries. It softens when she prays. It dances when she laughs. It cracks when she's holding too much. And if you listen closely, you'll hear that love isn't just in what she says, it's in how she says it. You'll hear it in how she comforts a child or a friend or a partner at the end of a weary day, in how she doesn't rush through a story but lingers in its beauty, in how she asks, "Are you okay?" like she's prepared to hold the answer, in how she says, "I'm proud of you," and means it with every inch of her being. You can always tell how a woman loves by how she speaks when no one is watching, when she's tired, when she's disappointed, when she's not trying to impress, because love isn't loud, it isn't always pretty, but it's present, it's patient, it's precise. The love in her voice isn't about romance alone. It's about reverence for herself, for the people around her, for life. She speaks like someone who's learned that words can wound deeper than fists. She speaks like someone who's decided that love should never leave bruises, not even in tone. She speaks like her voice is a sanctuary, and for those who truly listen, it becomes one. And yes, her way of speaking becomes her signature, not a sound, but a presence, not a volume, but a vibration. It tells you she is home to herself. It tells you her love is not something to be begged for. It is something to be invited into. And if you're fortunate enough to be loved by her, truly loved, you will feel it not just in her arms or her actions, but in her every word. There is something eternal about grace, not the kind that's practiced for applause or polished for the public, but the quiet grace that lives in a woman's voice. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It isn't loud. It slips into the room like sunlight through a sheer curtain, uninvited, yet welcome. It is the kind of grace that makes people pause, makes hearts hush, makes a man lean in without knowing why. Beauty can dazzle, yes, it can catch the eye and turn heads. But beauty alone is a spark. It flares and fades. What lingers, what haunts, what holds a man long after the lights go down is the tone of a woman who speaks with grace. A woman who knows that the way she delivers her truth is just as important as the truth itself. There is a certain pull in a voice that does not compete with the noise of the world. It is velvet and moonlight, slow and assured. It speaks not to seduce, but to soothe, not to convince, but to connect. And that connection, that is where desire is born. Not the frantic kind, not the surface hunger, but the kind of longing that lives in memory and murmurs in the back of a man's mind when he is alone. She does not have to raise her voice to command attention. Her tone is the proof of her power. She does not have to dress every word in decoration. She lets the space between her sentences speak for her. Because she understands something rare. Desire is not always ignited by what you say, but how you say it. And when she speaks with grace, she leaves an imprint, a soft, lingering echo that is far more intoxicating than any curve or color. There are women who walk into rooms and silence them, not because of beauty, but because of presence. And that presence is often first heard before it is seen. It lives in the way she says hello, in how she speaks someone's name as if it matters, in the way her voice doesn't rush or shrink, but flows, like she knows exactly who she is and has no need to prove it. A graceful tone is not passive. It does not mean shrinking or sweetening the truth. It means delivering the truth in a way that honors it. It means you can correct without cutting. You can disagree without destroying. You can hold your ground without raising your pitch. And in that restraint, there is allure. In that softness, there is strength. Men remember the way you made them feel far longer than the way you looked under dim lights. They remember how your voice curved around a compliment, how it held space when they struggled, how it didn't flinch when they fumbled. They remember that you didn't weaponize your words or use your tone to tower over them. They remember that your grace was not performance, it was peace. Desire needs a place to rest. It cannot bloom where there is constant noise, sharpness, or chaos. It grows in quiet, in softness, in patience. A woman who speaks with grace creates that place. She becomes the pause in a world addicted to fast answers. She becomes the melody in a life filled with static. She doesn't seduce by trying. She simply is. She doesn't chase attention. She attracts it, like gravity without force. And that attraction is not built on fleeting beauty. It's built on the calm in her tone, the kindness in her cadence, the warmth in her words. That is what makes her unforgettable. And when a man hears that tone, when he truly hears it, he may not even know what it is that draws him closer. He may not understand why he replays her voice in his mind like a favorite song, but he will feel it, the pull, the peace, the grace. And long after he forgets the shade of her lipstick or the lines of her dress, he will remember how she made him feel when she spoke. A woman's words hold weight, not because they are heavy, but because they are sacred. There is something powerful in the way she speaks, not just in her choice of words, but in the spirit that carries them. Her voice can be a bridge or a blade. It can be a balm or a bruise. And when she learns to let her words cradle rather than control, she becomes something unforgettable. Too often, the world teaches women to speak from defense, to build sentences like fences, to lace language with fear, to dress every truth in sharpness so it cannot be questioned. But when a woman speaks to command instead of connect, she builds walls instead of windows. And no man, no matter how open his heart may be, can feel safe behind walls built with pointed words. But the woman who speaks to cradle, that woman is rare. She has learned that to cradle is not to coddle. It is not weakness or surrender. It is strength that does not scream. It is the courage to be soft in a world that rewards hardness. When her words hold space instead of gripping it, when her tone invites instead of instructs, she becomes a place where a man feels like he can breathe. There is no freedom in control. Control stifles. It chokes the truth. It creates silence, but not peace. When a woman speaks to control, her words hover, always waiting to correct, to dominate, to remind. She does not mean harm. No, she means to protect, to secure, to avoid pain. But the way she speaks tightens rather than tends. She forgets that true connection grows not in obedience, but in openness. But when she speaks to cradle, her words fall differently. They don't press, they don't trap, they don't guilt, they glide. They wrap around his spirit like a blanket pulled over tired shoulders. They say, I see you not for what I want you to be, but for who you are. And in that recognition, a man begins to soften, to trust, to rise. You see, a man does not run from love. He runs from judgment dressed as guidance. He runs from pressure masked as passion. He runs from a voice that does not make room for his own. But when he hears a woman speak with grace instead of grip, his shoulders drop, his defenses loosen. He does not prepare to fight. He prepares to feel. When a woman uses her voice to understand instead of to instruct, she becomes a mirror, not a map. She does not tell him where to go. She reflects where he's been. She does not fix. She listens. And that listening is a language of its own, a language that says, I trust you to be whole, even when you're hurting. This kind of woman, her presence is medicine. Her words are healing not because they solve, but because they soothe. She does not need to be louder to be heard. She knows that presence is power and that the most unforgettable sentences are often the quietest. Her tone is not a leash, it is a light. And when a man experiences this, when he is spoken to with care rather than correction, with curiosity rather than control, something deep within him changes. He does not feel the need to defend his every breath. He does not feel small. He does not feel tamed. He feels seen. And there is no greater gift than to feel seen. Not for what you do, not for what you bring, but for who you are when all the noise is gone. That kind of sight comes through language laced with love, not fear. It comes through a tone that holds, not commands. She knows her words are not weapons, they are vessels, they are homes. And when she chooses to cradle instead of control, she becomes unforgettable, not because she impresses, but because she embraces. And in her embrace, there is peace. In her voice, there is room to be real. In her presence, there is the freedom to unfold. There is a quiet power in a woman who does not rush, a strength in the stillness between her sentences. She does not fill every moment with noise, nor does she mistake silence for weakness. She knows that in the pause, there is presence. In the breath between words, there is space for truth to rise. And that space, that intentional stillness, makes her unforgettable. She does not stumble over herself to be heard. She does not fight for airtime. She waits. She breathes. She chooses. And when she finally speaks, her voice carries more than sound. It carries weight. People lean in, not because she is loud, but because her words arrive with grace, with clarity, with purpose. She does not speak to compete. She speaks to connect. And in the pauses she allows, people find themselves listening without even knowing why. There is a kind of command that comes from calm. It is not the frantic urgency of someone trying to prove their point, but the calm assurance of someone who already knows the value of what they carry. The woman who understands pauses does not fear the space between thoughts. She lives in it. She lets it bloom. She understands that it is not the speed of her speech that holds power. It is the stillness within it. The pause is not absence. It is attention. It says, I am here. I am thinking. I am not just reacting. I am reflecting. And in a world addicted to quick comebacks and louder voices, her pause is a revolution. It is a refusal to rush. It is an invitation for depth. It says to the person in front of her, I respect this moment enough not to trample it. I respect you enough to choose my words with care. She does not fear the silence after a question. She lets it linger. She allows discomfort because she knows that truth often waits behind the noise. She does not speak just to fill time. She speaks when something meaningful rises from within. And when she does, her voice does not need to dominate. It already owns the room, not through volume, but through reverence. In a conversation, she holds power not in how much she says, but in how deeply she listens. The pause is her canvas, her punctuation, her wisdom made visible. She lets others speak, not to retreat, but to observe, to understand, to feel the shape of the moment before responding to it. Her silence is not surrender, it is strategy. When she speaks after a pause, her words are wrapped in intention. They do not scatter, they settle. They do not echo confusion, they carry clarity, and people remember them because they came from depth, not from defense, from presence, not performance. A woman who understands pauses also understands timing. She knows when to lean in and when to lean back. She can let silence speak louder than interruption. She can let her stillness be a statement. And those around her feel it. They feel the confidence it takes to not rush, to not fill, to not plead. They feel the steadiness in her spirit. She does not fear being misunderstood because she gives her words time to arrive fully. She does not fear losing control of the conversation because her control lies not in her dominance, but in her discernment. Her restraint is not repression, it is refinement. She is not hiding behind her silence. She is shaping something within it. There is elegance in her pauses, power in her poise. She may nod slowly, smile gently, take a breath before she answers. And in those moments, she is saying, without saying a word, that her voice is worth waiting for, that what she is about to say comes from thought, not impulse, from awareness, not anxiety. The woman who owns the conversation is not the one who never stops speaking. It is the one who knows when to stop, when to breathe, when to listen, when to trust the space between the sounds. That space is where respect lives. That space is where emotional intelligence unfolds. That space is where intimacy begins. And when she lives in that space, she does not need to fight for her place in the room. Her presence is the place. Her pause is the punctuation that makes every word matter. Her silence speaks as boldly as her speech. And every time she opens her mouth, she reminds the world that wisdom is not rushed, and neither is she. There is a beauty in words when they are born from truth. Not the glittered truth, not the painted version dressed to please, but the raw, honest, soul-deep truth. A woman who speaks from that place does not speak to impress. She does not reach for applause. She is not performing. She is revealing. She is remembering. And in that remembering, she becomes magnetic. To impress is to reach outward. It is to ask for validation, to chase eyes and approval, to tailor every sentence so it sits just right on someone else's tongue. But to express is to reach inward. It is to offer something sacred, something yours, something shaped by your own fire and forgiveness. When a woman speaks to express, she is not showing off, she is showing up. She does not speak in rehearsed lines. Her voice is not a script. It is an echo of what she's carried, a testimony of what she's come through. Her words may not be perfect, but they are honest. They may not always be pretty, but they are powerful. And that power, the power of truth, it seduces not by force, but by frequency. It resonates. It calls to something deep in others that recognizes itself. There is something unforgettable about a woman who speaks like she means it, Not loud, not theatrical, but present. A woman who isn't afraid to be seen in her fullness, messy and magnificent, tender and unafraid. She does not shrink to fit inside someone else's idea of her. She does not bend her voice just to make it sweet. She lets it be real, and that realness becomes her allure. The world teaches women early how to impress, how to speak in ways that make people comfortable, how to compliment without conviction, how to flirt with laughter that isn't theirs. But very few are taught the strength of expressing, of saying no without explanation, of saying yes without fear, of saying this is who I am without blinking. A woman who speaks to express does not chase charm. She does not decorate her pain to make it palatable. She does not pretend to be above feeling. She knows her voice is not a mask, it is a mirror. And in that mirror, others can finally see themselves. She speaks not to be adored, but to be understood, not to dominate, but to connect. And when she speaks her truth, it wraps around the room like incense. Slow, lingering, deep, because people are hungry for truth. They are starved for something that doesn't come prepackaged, something that doesn't sound like everyone else. And when she gives them that, when she gives them something real, they don't forget it. Impressing fades. It requires constant effort, constant bending, constant alertness to who's watching. But expressing, once rooted in truth, becomes effortless. Because it is no longer about the audience. It is about alignment. It is about freedom. It is about no longer needing to be anything other than what she already is. A woman who expresses does not flatter to manipulate. She does not use her voice as currency. She uses it as clarity. She names what she feels. She asks for what she needs. She honors her no. She celebrates her yes. And in doing so, she gives permission to others to do the same. You can feel it in the way she speaks about her past. She does not sanitize her story. She speaks of sorrow like she's walked through it and lived to light a candle on the other side. She speaks of joy like it belongs to her. She does not dilute herself to be digestible. She does not perform softness to be more acceptable. She lets her strength sit beside her sensitivity. She lets her laughter carry the wisdom of someone who has cried and risen. She is not speaking for effect. She is speaking for connection. And connection, true connection, is what seduces the soul. Not charm, not cleverness, not control, just truth. The kind of truth that feels like fresh water. The kind that people come back to again and again, thirsty and seeking. When she walks into a room, she doesn't try to impress. She doesn't need to. Her presence speaks first. And when she opens her mouth, what comes out is not a performance. It is a presence. It is her essence made audible. And that essence, rooted in truth, wrapped in grace, holds a power that no performance ever could. Across each word, in every pause, through every tone, there echoes a woman who knows herself. Not a woman performing softness or memorizing seduction, but a woman who remembers the sacredness of her voice. She does not raise it to be heard, she refines it to be felt. Her power is not in how loudly she speaks, but in the grace, the stillness, the truth she carries within each syllable. She speaks not to impress, but to express the depths of her soul. She understands that the way she speaks is the way she loves, gently, firmly, intentionally. Her pauses are not empty, they are eloquent. Her words do not control, they cradle. And her tone lingers not because it was polished, but because it was pure. Beauty may turn heads, but it is her voice, her expression of truth, her reverence for grace that makes a man stay, not just in body, but in memory, in longing, in respect. She owns the conversation because she owns herself. And that kind of woman, that kind of voice, that kind of truth is impossible to forget.